Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. I hope you had a great weekend. Welcome back to it. You know, the left these last few months has done everything they can to excommunicate Donald Trump from society, taking away his social media, of course, even some banks taking away his bank account. But they couldn't silence him forever. Last night, Trump spoke at CPAC. It's the Conservative Political Action Conference. It's a big conference for conservatives. 90-minute speech. He was obviously the big headliner of the weekend. This is the first time he's spoken since he left office on January 20th. It's been over a month of no Trump. It's never happened before. So we're going to talk about that speech here. And the question is, what do we do with Donald Trump? Where does Donald Trump fit into the party and into the party's future? What's the true story? Couple of things before we get to that. We play some clips. When you read about Donald Trump, this has been the case for the last 4 years and it's going to continue to be the case. That's why I'm just issuing a friendly reminder. When you read about Donald Trump, it is always being funneled through a media who irrationally hates him and will never be even remotely honest about what he's saying, has done, et cetera, et cetera. Here's just an example. Remember all this talk a little bit ago about Trump starting a third party? He addressed that yesterday.
We will do what we've done right from the beginning, which is to win. We're not starting new parties. You know, they kept saying, he's going to start a brand new party. We have the Republican Party. It's going to unite and be stronger than ever before. I am not starting a new party. That was fake news. Fake news, no. Wouldn't that be brilliant? Let's start a new party and let's divide our vote so that you can never win. No, we're not interested in that, no.
Remember all this talk in the media for a while, people making stuff up, filling time, trying to create chaos in the Republican Party, split and fracture their opposition, which are the Republicans. And Trump comes in and he says, no, we're not starting a new party. That would be stupid. Fake news. But the media makes stuff up. It's what they do, and they will always do it. We don't need to spend any time on the last 4 years of review, but let me just say this one quick. I was talking to a family member the other day who hates Trump. And this person's argument, one of his arguments was he hates you, that Trump hates you, and that he's a phony. And he quoted this in People magazine. This is from 1998. He quoted this. He said, if I were to run, I'd run as a Republican. They're the dumbest group of voters in the country. They believe anything on Fox News. I could lie to them and they'd still eat it up. I bet my numbers would be terrific. And he quoted that to me. That never happened. He never said that. Anything close to that. It's totally made up. Which is pretty funny when someone makes up, or they fall for a quote, right? The quote is, they're the dumbest group of voters in the country, and this person falls for that. What does that make them? But he never said anything even remotely close to that. But the media will keep pushing this stuff forever. I thought of this one yesterday, and then we'll move on, I promise. I don't even know why I thought of this, to be honest. The media has been so depraved for the last 4 years, truly depraved, morally corrupt, wicked, perverted, degenerate, debased, just corrupt to the core. There was serious talk in the media about a video of Donald Trump ordering prostitutes in Russia to urinate on him while they were having sex on a bed that Barack Obama and Michelle Obama once slept in. And that the Russian government had this tape and Putin was using it as blackmail against the president. That was a thing that was talked about openly for like weeks. They talked about this, right? These people in the media, nearly everything you hear about Trump is filtered first through these disgusting, perverted people. Never forget that. Never forget that. Trump does a thing over here, you're over here, and you don't find out about it until it first goes through these disgusting people who then can tell you whatever they want. And that's one reason why we're here, just to bypass that middleman there, that middleman who hate you. This is a tweet from Jennifer Rubin. Jennifer Rubin has been pitched as the conservative columnist for the Washington Post. And she's not even close to that. They may have taken away her conservative label. I don't know. But she hates Trump. So she wrote this on Twitter this weekend about how she's sleeping in this weekend because, Biden's the president. So everything's at peace now. I don't know what her weekends were like under Trump. I don't know why she, decided to let him ruin her life for no reason. But anyway, I'm glad she had a nice restful weekend sleeping in. Meanwhile, not such a great weekend in Syria as Biden dropped a bunch of bombs over there. So here's Syria this weekend as 22 Syrians were killed as she was napping. But that's just Jennifer Rubin and the rest of the media settling in for their 4-year nap as Biden and soon-to-be Kamala Harris are president. Anyway, I don't want to get off track, but Trump yesterday mentioned not one American soldier has been killed in Afghanistan for over a year. Isn't that amazing? Trump was the peace president. Trump was the peace president. You'd think the left would love that. He was a dove. Peace deals in the Middle East in ways that the left said would be impossible to achieve. We had a peace president for 4 years, and the left called him Hitler. Anyway, you know all that. Just don't forget it. So speech, it was great. He played the hits. This was a funny bit on immigration and the wall.
This is a con job. They're conning everybody. They know that. They know the wall was good. They knew the wall would work, but they didn't want to have it because we wanted it. I made one big mistake on the wall. I should have said, we will not have a wall. And then they would have said, let's build a wall. I made a big mistake. I made a big mistake. I'm sorry. Took us a year and a half extra because of that mistake. We will not have a wall. We need a wall immediately, said Chuck Schumer.
He's not wrong. Talked about getting kids back to school, the importance of that. We're going to talk about that coming up in 2 segments from now. Talked about different voting reform that we need. He talked about we need signature matching, we need voter ID, really all these things that we need voting day, like election day, as opposed to election 45 days. All these things that are the complete opposite of H.R. 1, which passed the House a couple days ago, and we're going to talk in great detail about tomorrow. This is Nancy Pelosi's voter reform bill. We'll do that tomorrow. Talked about all the stuff, talking about making better deals with China, making better deals with Latin American countries when it comes to immigration. I think we got a clip here. Yeah, we got this clip of Trump making better deals with the WHO. Check this out.
In another horrendous surrender, he agreed to get back into the World Health Organization for approximately $500 million a year, which is what we were paying. When I withdrew from the WHO, and you know the whole story with that, they called it badly. They really are puppets for China. They called and they wanted us to stay in. I said, how much are we paying? Approximately $500 million. How much is China paying? A much larger in terms of population country. Sir, they're paying $39 million. I said, why are we paying $500 million and they're paying $39? I could tell you why, because the people that made the deal are stupid, that's why. So
that's the stuff that got him elected, right? And the tone was just on point in every way. But the reason he told the story, and he said at the end, he said, listen, $500 million in the grand scheme of things, although that's a ton of money, he said, this is emblematic. That's what he said. He said, this is emblematic. It's the Iran deal, it's the Paris climate deal. None of it is America first. Okay, so that was yesterday in case you missed it. It may be worth going back and watching the whole thing. But I want to talk about what we do now. What do we do moving forward? When George W. Bush left office, he was done. He went back to clearing brush on his Texas ranch. And you didn't hear a peep from him until Jeb started to run. And that was it. He was campaigning for his brother, right? So you give him a pass on that. But you never heard from him. And there'd be times when people would ask him stuff and he'd be like, oh, I don't want to bother Obama. He's president now, let him do his thing. And just the idea of a president, a former president, clearing brush on his Texas ranch, there's something really honorable and romantic about that idea. You serve your 4 or 8 years and then you're done. You go home and you never talk politics again. I like that. I like that a lot. Trump's not going to do that. And that's fine. I guess I go back and forth on this is good for the Republican Party or not. This is where I'm landing right now. See what you think about this. Because there's a spectrum here, right? So there's people over here who want him to run for president in 4 more years. There was a straw poll done at CPAC. Now again, these are CPAC activists, right? If you would go to Orlando and do this, right? 97% support the job he did. 55%, as you see here, want him to run again. Right? So those are people who want him to run again. And then on the other side, there's people who never want to hear from him ever again. So where are you in that spectrum? Somewhere in the middle. I think Trump should not be the leader of the Republic. He doesn't need to be the face and the leader of the Republican Party anymore. But I don't think we need to excommunicate him. I think he needs to be the hype man for certain people who need to get elected for the sake of the party. Big picture, I think it's time for someone new and younger to come in and be the leader of the party, to be the face of the party. Someone like a Ron DeSantis, as you see here. So we need a new face of the Republican Party, and then Trump can be here and champion whoever is necessary for him to champion, right? There's some congressman who we need to get in, or a senator who Trump could help. And that's how he can best serve the party moving forward. And of course, these big Trump ideas, the populist ideas that the Republican Party can embrace as well. And I don't know how you feel about that. I think people are in like this all or nothing kind of camp. And I just want to give, I don't know, you don't need my permission, but like a permission to be like, oh, yeah, we can find some middle ground here. You don't work for Trump, I guess you don't work for Trump. Trump works for you. He did when he was president, and he still does now. And maybe permission is an okay word. I want to give you permission that you're not being disloyal if you want someone else to take a more leadership position in the party. Conservatives are fiercely loyal. And I want to suggest, which is good, but I want to suggest here that it's okay to hop off the Trump train at times, right? We loved a lot about the Trump train. I loved a lot about the Trump train. Served its purpose. But maybe we can start laying some tracks for a new train, and that's okay. You're not being disloyal if you want to do that. But I still want Trump to be on the train, too, right? So what's the true story here? Republicans have an amazing bench of up-and-coming leaders. We should be super encouraged about that. The Democrats have no one. You saw them in their primary. Pete Buttigieg almost won. All right? Second place was 78-year-old Bernie Sanders. They have no bench. Republicans have a deep bench, and we need to utilize that. And I think if we're too attached to Trump, it could take the oxygen out of the room and not give the attention that these other younger and also wonderful people deserve and would help the party as a whole. Make sense? Great leaders know when they need to be the active president and CEO. I'll put it in business terms that I know the former president understands. There's times to be the leader, the front and center, the active president and CEO. And then there comes a time when you take a bit of a step back and you become a board member. And you help raise and train the next generation of leadership. And I think the former president can do a wonderful job of that for the good of the party and for the good of the country. Friendly reminder too, please download our app on your smartphone. I'm so grateful you're watching. However you're watching, there's tons of different ways to watch us on Apple TV and Roku and Amazon Fire and all these other places. Pluto. But you can watch us on the go on your phone, and it's totally free. Really good app, easy to use. Just click the show, boom, boom, it pops right up. You can close your phone, and it still plays in the background, so you can be listening to it, driving, whatever. And it's a total free download in the App Store. Just search for The First TV, and it'll pop right up. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I should have said this in the last segment. I think Trump is saying he's going to run again, or kind of like alluding to it, because that helps him keep his relevance. If he says I'm never going to run again, his relevance would be gone and his influence would be gone. So he's not going to do that. So I think he's playing coy for that reason. But I don't think he's going to run again for real in 4 years. I think a better power move for him would be to be the kingmaker. And in 3 years, he stakes his flag and says, I'm passing the torch on to Ron DeSantis or whatever. And that way he can still look good without actually having to be the president again. But who knows? I want to switch gears here. I was talking to a friend yesterday. I live in San Diego, and he was walking on the beach, and some lady comes up to him, and my buddy wasn't wearing a mask. No mask, because you're outside at the beach. And some lady comes up to him and says, hey, you got to put your mask on. And he says, no. And she says, she gets in his face and says, blank you, and gives him the double middle finger. Like the Stone Cold Steve Austin double middle finger in his face, and then walks away. So that's California. And you look at something like that and you're like, what's wrong with people? Hurt people hurt people. And that's what I want to talk about in this segment. I got a bunch of examples of that I want to share. When someone acts like that, and they do something crazy like that, of course there's gonna be politics involved. There's a mix of, maybe someone's having a really bad day, but at the root of it, hurt people hurt people. There's a human nature element here that we need to understand. So let's talk about it. A woman wrote an article in the New York Times about when she started a blog where she was just trying to get people canceled, right? And she got people canceled for being problematic, racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, ethnophobic, ableist, whatever, all these terrible, horrible things. She said she spent hours on each post. She was a senior in high school at the time. Why would she do that? Why would she spend hours on each post trying to ruin people's lives? Turns out her sister was, and that article that we just put up there, that New York Times article, was a mea culpa. She apologized for what she did. She said, I did it because my sister was studying in Bolivia, my older sister, and she got in a bus accident. And she was slowly dying of injuries that in America would be treatable, but she was slowly dying thousands of miles away. And she was obviously so distraught at this. She dropped out of school, became severely depressed, and she was stuck at home, and she dove into her blog, where she just spent her life tearing people down. She says, in the years since, I've looked back on my blog with shame and regret about my pettiness, my motivating rage, my hard and fast assumptions that people were either good or bad. I just wanted to see someone face consequences. No one who had hurt me ever had. That's a profound line. I wanted to see someone face consequences. No one who had ever hurt me had ever faced consequences. Hurt people hurt people. I think again of what we talked about last week. San Diego County had a anti-racist seminar, and one of the slides says, "Dear white people, when you say, we here, we people of color," and you see on the bottom left, it says, "White people, when you say, if the riots come here, I'd get my gun, what we hear is, you fantasize about killing black people." Okay, and we did a whole segment of how could you possibly interpret what I said the way you did? What is that? They're hurt. Hurt people funnel everything that they see and everything that they hear through the prism of their own pain. Their pain becomes the idol, the center of their existence, and everything comes through that first before they fully interpret it. Every word they hear is interpreted to mean something negative about them. If you're in pain, you suspect evil intent with everything that everyone does. Everything's unfair, everyone's unjust, everyone's out to get me. And because you're so self-absorbed, self-centered, literally, a hurt person generally is not aware of how their actions are hurting other people or society, or themselves, really. Hurt people hurt people. So how do we not be that? Because we've all experienced trauma, no doubt about it. So how do we not be that hurt person that hurts others? I saw this clip of Dan Crenshaw on the Joe Rogan show, and they're talking about failure. I think Joe Rogan specifically is talking about toxic masculinity and these words that we throw around in society. He says we throw them around to cover. If people throw it as a cover because they feel bad that they lost, right? And they don't want to feel bad, so they blame the system or whatever, right? But Joe Rogan says that that feeling you get of losing is incredibly important in your life because it can make you tougher. It's the only way, really, to get tougher. And Joe Rogan goes under this whole thing. He's like, that's why you got to do jujitsu, right? Because you go to jujitsu and you get beat up, you get thrown around, you get punched in the face of the whole thing, and it teaches you humility. But then you keep going, you keep going, you keep going, and you get better. And that's a beautiful life lesson that we all need to know. So yes, I think it's true that hurt people, but it doesn't have to be that way. So here's the Congressman, former Navy SEAL Dan Crenshaw.
And there's a lot of studies that show people who have suffered deep trauma end up better for it as long as they're telling themselves the right stories. And so this, I go into this a lot in my book too. You have to tell yourself the right story about that trauma. You have to tell yourself that you are resilient and that you are empowered to overcome it. That's a very important narrative that you have to tell yourself. If you tell yourself it just happened to you and it's not fair and everybody's out to get you,
right.
I wouldn't wish that psychological state on my worst enemies.
I agree with you.
Well, maybe my worst enemies, but that's the point, right?
Yes.
Like you would never wish that upon somebody you like, and that's an important truth I think we have to tell ourselves.
So what is the true story about trauma, or the right story, the potential right story? The right story is you are resilient and you can overcome it. You are empowered to overcome it. We'll do it together, but you can overcome this. And then when bad things happen, or because a bad thing happened and you overcame it, now you can help other people. You are now equipped fully to help other people who are going through the same trauma. That's the cycle of it. And it's a beautiful cycle when it's done properly. I have an example I want to share here of a deep trauma, which led to a dark place, but then resilience and redemption, and then finally to a place of serving others. Does that timeline make sense? So trauma, the fall, right? And then redemption and resilience and helping others. And you're stronger than where you started. This is a video of Jeffrey. There's one particular reason why I want to play this. We could go into a whole transgender thing with this as well. And we did on my radio show. We played much more of this video on the radio show because we were talking about transgenderism, but that's not the point I want to make here. So Jeffrey lived a good portion of his life from when he was really like 16 or 17 on as a woman. Why? Why did he do that? If there's any kids listening now that may want to tune away for a minute. Jeffrey was raped when he was 9 years old by one of his dad's male employees. And after that, he asked himself, why do men want to have sex with me? There clearly is a traumatic event and then a traumatic story. Men want to have sex with me. Why do men want to have sex with me? Right? Over and over and over. Then his parents got divorced, so now he's thinking, no one loves me. 17 years old, he moves to Portland, Maine. He got raped by 4 men. He's only 17. And then at the end of his story, he says, oh yeah, before I was 9, my mom would tell me that she wished I was born a girl. She really wanted a girl, not a boy. And he says he would constantly think about that. So again, back to Crenshaw, it's the story in your head that matters. What's the story you tell yourself? And you can see the story that Jeffrey told himself over and over. And he said he was always living with this rejection. Even my mother thinks I should have been born a girl. And he says this turmoil was just going over and over. And he said he kept hearing these things nonstop. So one day he was sick of it and he said, you know what, fine, I am a girl. So at 18, started taking hormones. Well, decades went and Jeffrey became a Christian, repented of all this, repented of all the drugs and the prostitution. He says, yeah, my body's all messed up, but my spirit is as pure as he is. But, so that's the trauma, the dark place, the redemption, beautiful. But what do you do with that? Here's what he does.
If I could go back as a little boy and have things different, some things I would have different. being raped, being a prostitute. I'm kind of grateful it happened to Jeffrey. It's given me a compassion to people that are prostituting, who are going through gender identity confusion. I can cry with those people. Those little boys and little girls that are being fondled by people and have no one to talk to. I can do that. And truly have compassion in my heart. And if I could say to anybody, please get to know God. You know, He loves you. He knew you before you were in your mother's womb.
It's a good man right there. Jeffrey started to tell himself a different story. And I wanted to share that's the end of his testimony. I want to share that because of the compassion that he can now give to others who are going through similar emotional trauma. He can have compassion. The word compassion is a beautiful word. Calm and passion. Passion means to suffer, right? The passion of the Christ, right? The suffering. Passion means suffer. Calm and compassion means with. So compassion means to suffer with, to suffer alongside, and it's a beautiful thing. That's not what the progressive mindset says to do. The progressive mindset is often a misguided compassion because you're not suffering alongside. When it comes to transgenderism specifically, they're telling lies to little children. Oh yeah, get puberty blockers, right? Do what feels good. It's a very comforting lie, but it's not compassion. Jeffrey says that the doctrine of the day is do what feels good, and it's so sad. Do what feels good. It's hard to deal with the pain of trauma because it doesn't feel good in the moment, so we avoid it. And then it ends up coming out in very destructive ways for that individual person and for society. Does that make sense? That's the hurt people hurt people. Hurt people are hurt and they don't want to deal with it because it hurts. It hurts to deal with it. So they end up hurting others instead and themselves. There's a lot of pain in today's world. And those hurt people hurt people. But again, it doesn't have to be that way. More compassion is a good thing. But it's got to be true compassion. And it's only true compassion if it's based on a true story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want to talk about why kids are still not in school. This is outrageous. In England, they've been like way more freaked out about the virus than we ever even were here in America, even in California where I am. Kids were schools were the last thing to be closed and the first thing to be opened up. And here in America, particularly California and other states, schools were the first to be shut down and now the last to be opened. The former president, talked about this last night at CPAC.
Think of it. We're educating students on the border, but our own people, the children of our citizens themselves, are not getting the education that they deserve. There's no reason whatsoever why the vast majority of young Americans should not be back in school immediately. The only reason that most parents do not have that choice is because Joe Biden sold out America's children to the teachers' unions. His position is morally inexcusable, you know that. Joe Biden has shamefully betrayed America's youth, and he is cruelly keeping our children locked in their homes. No reason for it whatsoever. They want to get out.
Jonathan Butcher is here from the Heritage Foundation and a senior fellow at the Goldwater Institute. Mr. Butcher, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Matt, really good to talk to you. Excellent bow tie. What's the What's the union's play here? Why are they doing this? Why are they keeping schools shut down?
Well, in large metro areas in particular, the unions simply have said there's not a plan that they think is safe enough for their members. Now, in reality, what they have done as recently as last summer and then through the fall is use the headlines that this has generated to emphasize their other political aims. They've talked about things like forgiving rents and mortgages, and then gotten into issues of defunding police and school security.
Insane. Where do they think they'll get, because it's money, right? So it comes down to those issues and more money. Where do they think this more money is going to come from? They obviously have leverage, right? They have leverage of keeping kids out of school. Where's the money going to come from that's going to make them ultimately open schools back up?
Well, leaders of the NEA and the AFT, the two largest teacher unions, had a photo up at the White House just a couple of weeks ago. And so they definitely have the ear of the administration. And the administration has been talking about a very sizable COVID package, again, with well over $100 billion that would go to K-12 schools. So additional money to schools with requirements from the CDC that you maintain 6 feet of distance between students means more hiring of teachers, which in places that have strong union control could mean additional union members.
That's it. That's what I was getting at. I couldn't put it together, Jonathan, because I knew it'd be more money, but I was like, okay, but how's that money going to get to the union's hands? But that's what it is. So it's more teachers.
Well, the frustrating thing, I think, is that in districts like Chicago and Philadelphia, where the district leaders and even the mayor in some cases had called teachers back to in-person learning, the unions said that they decided to flex their muscle and say, no, teachers aren't going to go back. And unfortunately, the districts and the cities have acquiesced so far, and they've said, okay, teachers don't have to come back. Chicago said that they reached an agreement with the unions on this, but really the unions got everything that they asked for. I mean, they delayed reopenings for at least a month at the time of the agreement, which was 3 weeks ago, and there still is no plan for high school students to get back in class. So that's a real concern, right? I mean, you certainly want all children to have the best option that we can give them right now, but to have some plan for some students and no plan for others, it shouldn't satisfy anyone.
Oh, it's so crazy too, because the private schools, I can speak to San Diego, the private schools have been open for months and no major outbreaks, teachers aren't dying, right, because of the private schools that are open. So we have a case study. It's not even like we have to look to England, where you can maybe make an argument that there's differences in the population or culture or behavior or whatever. You're just looking within the cities. And in Berkeley, California, up near San Francisco, the head of the teachers union dropped his preschooler off at a private preschool, but still keeps the public schools closed. What do the unions say about the science, Jonathan?
Well, I think any parent, right, has the right to send their child to the best learning experience, best learning option that they can get. But likewise, they don't have the right to block that same experience from anyone else. And that's what unions have done for decades, right? Generations, effectively. But especially in the past 30 years, as we've had the rise of charter schools and private school scholarships. And just the cities that I was talking about, right? Chicago and Philadelphia, especially in Chicago, and then also LA, the unions there are the ones who have blocked the creation of additional charter schools in those cities, right? Charter schools in the U.S. serve as a percent, a larger percentage of children from low-income homes and minority students. And so these unions are blocking the creation of new options that would help these very students who oftentimes are the ones who need the most assistance.
Such a good point that they've been doing this for decades. This is just their newest way of blocking opportunities. And then the hypocrisy on top of that, Gavin Newsom's, his kids, I don't know how many are in school right now, have been going to a private school for months that have been meeting in person. That is so wildly hypocritical. It's more hypocritical than I think him even going to the French Laundry to eat while restaurants were closed and stuff. So what do we do, Jonathan? How do we get these schools opened up when the unions hold all the strings?
Well, I think there are three big things that we can do, especially right now as many state legislatures are in session. So state lawmakers are back to work right now. And so I think first, anytime that a union defies a call from the district or from a mayor to return to in-person learning, we should immediately say that students can attend any public school that they can get access to in the state, subject to space. I think, secondly, that we should make sure that any caps on charter schools, either the creation of them or enrollment caps, are lifted automatically. And these are the caps that I was talking about in Chicago and LA that unions are largely responsible for. But there are also states like West Virginia that are considering new school choice options like charter schools as well as private school scholarships, where this kind of thing could take effect right away and help a state that at the moment has no such options. And then I think finally, we should be prepared to take the salaries of unionized employees and send them back to the state so that they're considered a savings. And then lawmakers should create private school scholarships in the form of education savings accounts for as many students as they can possibly serve so that students can access something right away.
Months and months ago, I said, COVID's been terrible, right? But if we can get some real school choice out of this, maybe we can find a silver lining. Unfortunately, do you think we've missed the boat on no longer funding systems and instead funding students? Has that ship sailed and we missed our best chance?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the effort to bring more options to students was underway, over the past 2 decades in particular. It's slow moving because of the entrenched opposition. But I think that between surveys that we've seen now and the exceptional increases in students who are attending learning pods, and being homeschooled today, as well as the waiting lists on many private schools around the country, show that there is parent demand. So state lawmakers, this is their opportunity to consider those proposals that they may have been, a little wary of before because of the entrenched opposition.
Let's hope it's streamlined it and fast-forwarded it decades so we can get to that ultimate point. Jonathan Butcher, Heritage Foundation, Goldwater Institute. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Have a great day, brother. Appreciate you. This should have been day one of all this COVID stuff, is we just open up school choice, fund students instead of teachers. What a shame that instead of systems. What a shame that it's taken this long still. We'll talk about kids and COVID and some other. Johnson & Johnson vaccine just came out, which is wonderful news. So we'll talk about that with Professor Vincent Racaniello coming up next. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, in light of our last segment, we just got word, breaking news, that Gavin Newsom has said that he's offering, and we've heard between $2 to $6 billion in grants to schools in California that can get back to in-person instruction for TK, it's transitional kindergarten, to second grade by March 31st. So I think Gavin Newsom hears the recall footsteps coming, perhaps. But to get some insight on reopening schools and the new vaccine and lots of other good news, I believe Professor Vincent Racaniello is here, of course, the professor of virology at Columbia University, microbe.tv. Watch his podcast there. Professor, hello, sir.
Good morning. Another week, another vaccine, Mike.
Oh, let's start there, actually. I want to get back to the schools because this is definitely top of mind. So what is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine?
So Johnson & Johnson is an adenovirus vectored spike. So the AstraZeneca vaccine, which we heard about a while ago, being used in the UK and other countries, also an adenovirus vectored spike. This one is very cool, though. 1 dose only. And you don't have to keep it frozen forever. You can keep it in the fridge for quite a while. So lots of advantages. And the results of their phase 3 interim results look really good all around. So I'm very excited because right away we have 10 million doses of this going forward, and they can produce up to 100 million doses in the next month. So really good news, I think.
100 million doses in a month? How can that be?
No, in the next few months. They've got 10 million ready to go, apparently. Wow. And they say we can make 100 million in the coming months, which is similar to Moderna and Pfizer. So we can cover most of the U.S. with this. This is great.
Wow, in just a few months. Do we have a % efficacy on the Johnson one yet?
Yeah, we do. We have all kinds of numbers. Overall, in the U.S., 72% preventing moderate to severe, In Latin America, 72%. Even in South Africa, where there's a variant circulating, it was still 57% efficacy. But the number I think is the most important, 100% effective at preventing hospitalization and death. Okay, it's less effective at preventing, the moderate disease, but death and hospitalization, 100%. That's great. No matter where it was, U.S., Brazil, South Africa. This is just great news, and that's what we want. We want a vaccine that's going to keep you out of the hospital and keep you from dying.
Because you're still going to get things still get you sick in the world. So if we can get COVID down to that,
right.
then I think that'd be good. I read something the other day about that Pfizer is going to produce more of their vaccine as well. And that I think it was Pfizer, they said they said they may not need the cold chain anymore. So where they thought it needed to be -94, they're like, oh, well, maybe it could just be between -13 and 5, which seems like a totally different ballgame. Have you heard the same?
I've heard the same. And apparently they went back and looked at it over again in their labs. And I think that was a good thing to do because the cold chain, although not impossible, that's tough, right?
And this is maybe for a different conversation because we have a lot more news to follow here, but I feel like that's something that could be known. I know there's a ton of unknowns, right? But how could the scientists, and I don't want to criticize them, that's not my role here, goodness, but you think they would have known that or not? How did they miss that, you think?
Well, I don't think they missed it. I just think that they said, our experience is that we have to keep this frozen for, a long time. And once you thaw it, it doesn't work right away. But then they just went back. Maybe they never really looked at how long you could keep it thawed, right? Because they had other things to worry about. I mean, remember, they got these vaccines out in less than a year. That's pretty darn good. So I'm not so concerned with that because we've gotten a lot of vaccines out with those restrictions, those cold chain restrictions. Yeah. So they're not impossible, but this will really help for sure.
Yeah, that's great. How many, I don't even know the right words here. How many doses per vial? Is that the right thing?
Yeah.
Are those the right words here? And what does that mean? Can you help us understand that?
So most vaccines are shipped in vials that have more than one dose, right? And a dose is what you get in your arm. And it would be crazy to put one dose in a vial because that's wasteful of the vials. Yeah, actually, it turns out that vials are limiting, right? We need lots and lots, millions of vials. So from the start, these companies have been putting more than one dose in a vial. So when you get a vaccine, they draw it out of a vial, and then the next person, it comes out of the same vial. It's a different needle, of course, so it's totally okay. But you can get multiple doses out of a vial, and that's more efficient. You can have maybe 5 or 6, up to 11, 12 doses, depending on the company. And if you have a big line of people waiting to be vaccinated, that's great. And, sometimes there are extra doses in the vial, too, because the machine puts a little more in, which is really good. So that's what it means to have multi-dose vials.
Okay. And so it's a good thing you're saying. I heard about some potential inefficiency, and I don't know where it comes from, some rule from the FDA, don't know, where they're not allowed to pool the extra doses that may exist in the bottom of each vial to get a couple other doses. Have you heard that?
Yes, right. That's right. You can't, if you have a little bit of fluid left that's not quite a dose, right? You can't mix it with that from another vial. The FDA doesn't want you to do that because you could run into problems with contamination and so forth. Right. But
you okay with that
can
rule?
certainly, yeah, I think that's fine. I think that avoids issues happening for sure.
Okay. We got to talk about this one another day too, perhaps. But I know we've talked before about mRNA and how this is the very beginnings of this new technology, if you will. And I was reading that they may help treat malaria, a malaria vaccine, maybe an mRNA vaccine. That would change the world.
Totally.
Do you see that potential there?
Absolutely. So the cool thing is that mRNA vaccines were in development for years, but there's nothing like having a vaccine out there and working to show that it's a good technology, right? And so that's what we had with the pandemic. So in a way, that's one good thing that came out of it. We made these mRNA vaccines. Now they're going to be developed for all kinds of other infectious diseases, like you said, malaria, HIV, herpes viruses, human diseases. It's amazing the potential of this technology. Yeah.
That's a whole new era. That's amazing. Wow.
It is.
Right,
it
last
is.
question.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, I don't know. last question for you, Professor, about schools. Should schools open? I don't want to put you in a political position here, but what does the science say, and how would you do it safely?
So you can open schools safely. The first thing you need to do is make sure all the teachers are vaccinated, right? We can't vaccinate kids yet because they haven't been tested on the vaccines, but that's happening now. And in a few months, we'll be able to vaccinate kids. So by the fall, kids should all be vaccinated. So first, vaccinate all the teachers. Second, do masking still. Make sure the kids are masked, make sure the teachers are masked, and do the proper distancing in classrooms, kids spaced apart. When you do that, as long as you have low local infection rates, you can open your schools, okay? And I have no issue with that whatsoever because the teachers are all going to be protected. And as we have said before, the kids, while they're not completely free of disease after infection, they get at much less frequency. So that's how you do it.
We got 20 seconds, Professor. End on a high note. I can sense your positivity.
I think this vaccine data are great. And we have many, many more doses. The cool thing is it's working against the variants. And if people are scared, I've heard someone call these scariants because people are getting scared of them. This vaccine is going to handle it. And I think the others are going to do it as well. I think we're in a really good position now.
So grateful. Microbe.tv. Thanks, Professor. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you on Monday. More good news with the professor next week, I'm sure, as well. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word.